So these are what I had, but to start the discussion, I don't know, I have a little bit more time, but yeah?
I have a question, and it's something that just comes back to stuff that Sarah and I have been working on a bit, and with Doris for a while, but can we go back to the slide with the flying wedge?
Yes.
So you kind of talk about tragedy, which I think is really interesting, and what's interesting to me, so I get this and I think it's really interesting, but I'm really interested in the green line between the spots, because right now in first person victim, right, you're just kind of navigating, and you know, Constantine's experience is an interesting one where you thought you could do something, but that was informed by kind of probably gameplay conventions, not anything you did in the game, right, because you never actually did anything that accomplished anything. Right? And when I think about tragedy and when I think about like a tragic play, there's an interesting thing that goes on there, which is, you know, take Sophocles for example. The audience have a different experience than the characters in the play and the actors of the play, right? And so like the audience has this dramatic irony where they know what's going to happen. You know, the point of Oedipus is not that people are surprised that he did it. It's to watch the uncoiling of the spring because everybody already knows. The character has this illusion of free will and thinks, oh, I did something to change the course of this, right? All of the characters in the play who are agents are doing this. They're like, oh, we send the kid off so we're going to be okay. And he's like, oh, well, I thought these were my parents, so I'm going to leave, so it's going to be okay. In the play of First Person Victim, there's never really the illusion of kind of free will, right? You bring that with you as a game player, but you never actually feel like you've changed the course of anything. And I think it's still jarring, but it makes it not tragedy, right? It makes it, I don't know if it's pathetic or pitiful, not in the pejorative sense of it, but in the kind of, you're hopeless, right? You're absolutely hopeless because there's nothing you can do. And so
the key thing is that it makes you feel like a bystander rather than a participant, perhaps.
Yeah, and I
so
think
you feel like if you've never had any agency to intervene at all, and it's kind of clear to the player, then it lessens the impact.
Yeah, and I think tragedy
not being able to succeed in helping.
Yeah, I think tragedy can come in two ways. Either as an audience member witnessing someone perceive that they have changed the course of events for the better, and only to find out, you know, have that kind of hamartia, I think that's the word, right, or an agnoresis or whatever, that moment of like, oh God, you know, that's my mom, or being the actor thinking that you've changed that and then not having that happen. So I think the really interesting, I guess for me, is that green spot, right? Like what can we do with that green spot, that line to pull the player in even more?
But the fact that you've got this cause and effect system, and the fact that you don't see what happens to a person later on in the story unless you saw what happened earlier in the story, means you do have agency. The only problem is that the only agency that you have is to motivate a really bad thing to continue happening. So the sense that I had at the beginning of the game was actually true. Things will blow up when I get close to them. I am the reason why these things are happening around me as a player. So I'm wondering whether actually sort of like maybe taking the curtain off this somehow, like actually letting people realize that this story only continues because you continue to be a part of it. Might actually continue to might give you that sense. You do have agency. The agency that you have is whether you're going to walk in this direction or that direction. Whether you see someone on the road, are you going to go up to them or walk away from them?
And that would be the tragic revelation, right? That would be the revelation that what you thought was okay was actually not, and you're causing all the problems, right?
And that's great in a game where anything you do is going to be tragic. It's going to be cause a problem for someone, because then any decision that you think that is a good idea will never be a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, except then the way you win the game is not to play it.
Yeah.
Or to stop. Which surely that is not an actual outcome that is desired by our designer.
I think there's a movie with Matthew Broderick.
Right, exactly.
I mean, no, but is that not a problem? I mean, it's like, you know, if you realize that there is no way through this experience where you can win, that's actually, and then you stop playing at that point, I think it's actually a reasonable thing. If you went through multiple playthroughs to come to that conclusion. You still get experience, and even better, you get the sense of utility gets driven home even further. And if you're a victim and you can't do anything about your environment, I think there is a lot of criticism, maybe not criticism, but misconceptions about what people in war-torn areas can do about the situation. I think people think that they have a lot more agency than they actually do, and this game actually does a very good job in sort of like getting across that sense that no, really, they don't have that option. I would actually give them, like for that first person player guy, you know, actually have a gun somewhere in the game that they can pick up, and they get shot the moment they get seen by a soldier unless they're carrying arms.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
So it has some consequences. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you think about the concept of Greek dramas, the point was that you sit there, you cannot do anything, and you see the hero kind of like going through his destiny, and like, you know, and catharsis. The idea was that your soul is being washed out by looking how a person is really failing. And the funny thing is, in your game, if you look at it, it's like you kind of like steer the scenes. Like the choices you make, where you go, something is happening and other stuff is not happening. Which is funny because that's the way you change the Greek tragedy, that you change where it's heading to without doing anything, just saying this is the scene I will go to now. And that's quite interesting in the sense of, because you take parts of it, you still cannot do anything, but you do something, as you said, by steering the scenes. I think that's an interesting version of a Greek tragedy.
Yeah. So, is it a game? Is it interactive narrative? What is this thing?
I'd be reasonably confident saying it is a game that you cannot win, but a lot of people may not know that what games they're playing. Because if that's the game, if the game is to steer the scenes so that you see what you're interested in seeing, even though it's all tragic outcomes, then you can win the game by seeing everything there is to see. You don't win the game by saving people.
See, I don't know that I think of it as a game, but I'm not sure that I care.
Yeah.
It's close enough to a game that you can call it a game
Yeah.
and reap the benefits of it being called a game without it actually having to fit anyone's strict definition of a game. I mean, obviously you're going to have the StarCraft 2 guy who's like, needs more Protoss, and obviously that guy's not going to think of it as a game, will never think of it as a game because his genre expectations are so specific that you could never in a million years meet those. Even if you had a gun for that guy to pick up and shoot somebody, he's going to be like, well, why can't I select different weapons? You know, it would end forever. It would never end. So yeah, I don't think it's a game, but I don't really think it matters whether it's a game or not.
Yeah, whenever people bring up the what is a game, debate, I kind of cringe a little bit because I always wonder, okay, so what are we actually getting out of this? I feel like it's entirely representative of, the class of games that are frequently referred to as serious games. I think this fits very well within it. So at least for the applied pragmatic side of the question, I think it's a game.
Can I ask a question? What do you think would be the perfect curve for this experience of game?
The curve.
If we look at this engagement.
Dramatic curve?
Why should there be a curve?
Why does it need one?
No. So if a player is playing this, what do you think would be the perfect thing, what we would like to see?
I don't think there is one. I mean, I'm kind of unclear on that one. I think it is just as valid to have somebody who goes on this world tour of never-ending terror, and they just see terrible thing after terrible thing after terrible thing for hours and hours and hours, is actually, to me, just as valid an experience as the guy who walks out the front door of his apartment after getting that first cell phone call and is immediately killed by a bomb. Right? Because part of what I thought was good about this drama manager and the different tracks that you can take. Sorry, I just moved out of your way. What I liked about that is that it represents the fact that there is no monolith experience of being in this actual, you can have somebody who manages to get to their friend's house and they, pull an Anne Frank and hide in a closet and they're perfectly fine. And then you have the unlucky bastard who walks out his front door and is immediately shredded by shrapnel. So, I don't think there is an ideal curve. I think that it's what you would really want them to do. Maybe if it's you want try again to be really high, right? Because you want them to get the maximum number of different paths.
That's actually why I asked the question. Because we've been advising some of the students who want to do experiences that maybe they should not try to keep the engagement high. They actually try to make it very, very low. So if you have an experience like this, it's not fun to be in a war. You really, maybe, would like people to feel, I do not want to get back to this place.
But
because that's what you want to go for. But maybe you need some high engagement to get them into it, to get the most out of it.
But that is not fun doesn't mean that you kind of go play it. I mean, this is where fun is probably not, engagement might be a better concept for it.
I guess.
Well, I'd like to have two different questions asked, actually. One is, will you recommend somebody else play this game? And do you want to talk about this game with someone who else has played this game? I think those are the two questions actually you want to get in the positive.
Yeah. I think I want to continue the experience negative could have at least two different meanings. One of which is a good thing for you guys, and the other of which is a bad thing for you guys. So you could say, I don't want to continue this experience because I think this game is garbage. You could also say, I don't want to continue this experience because it's traumatizing. And you want that second kind of response, right? Not the first kind of response. But this question doesn't distinguish between those two things, right?
I think the curve that you would absolutely not want is the non-curve where it just stays on 0 the entire time. In fact, blue sort of alarms me, that sort of -1 continuously, right? Because there are people who like to watch Schindler's List and have seen it a lot of times, and you're kind of like, okay, but it doesn't mean that they're not affected by it. And then there's people who've seen it once, and that's enough. But if you believe it to be an affecting and convincing thing, I'd be concerned by someone who's just like, meh. Because then you're like, really? But I mean, again, that's if you believe it to be effective.
But we live in an age of meh.
Yeah. No.
And I think actually, especially, so I've heard.
I thought that it was more like everything is the best thing ever. According to the internet.
Yes, but you remember from The Incredibles, right? If everyone is special, nobody is special.
Very profound.
What the hell was I even saying? Thanks, Abe. Good work. No, we live in an age of meh. And actually, there is, in gamer cultures, there is a culture of meh, right? Where being impressed by something isn't awesome enough. Like, really liking something is bad in a lot of different gamer subcultures. So you might be running up against, the wall of meh, which you might not be able to, there's no piercing the meh. It is so...
There is one way to pierce the meh, and that's to make people really hate your game. And it happens. Games become really well known because of that sometimes. And I think Epic Games actually does a really good job of writing this, of making games that some people absolutely hate, and as a result of that, get written up, and more people find out about it. That's not necessarily, that's the Fox News approach to breaking through the wall, and I'm not...
No, I was with you up into the words Fox News. I'm not for...
admit it's effective.
Yes, but I'm against anything that anyone would ever emulate Fox News in any way. Even if it's effective. Even if it made unicorns prance through the room. I'm against it.
Well, I think there's place for polarizing works, especially when you're dealing with traumatic experiences like these. It's okay to make something that someone has that curve, not because they're bored, but because they don't like that experience. They just don't want to have that experience again. If they're bored, then you've got that -1 line. The -3 line is actually more interesting to me.
Yeah, exactly. This is actually the average of the 11 that we tried out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is okay if your variance is high, right? Then I think you...
That is really high, is the variance.
May not actually think things are bad. They may just be saying that because that's the cool thing.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, it's kind of like Terry Pratchett says, right? Hate and love are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Like, if you really loathe something, you'll avoid it with all the force you can muster. But if you just kind of hate it, hate is a force of fascination, right? Like, you hate it because you've engaged with it and you're like, oh, yeah.
That actually leads me to the last one, where we started out last week. Is this kind of do you think it's a valuable way of evaluating engagement? This idea of having this stops in time. Of course, we should not make the questions so long and so many, but this desire to continue, is it something that we use to investigate games with? Because before it was about the experience, it was about the fun, it was about immersion, and of course immersion is part of this, but presence and flow and these things. But this continuation desire, is it something that's important for evaluating games?
Not for this game.
Yeah.
No.
I would also say this is a perfect example where it's not important.
Yeah.
And therefore, I have to say, to judge it as a useful tool, I would have to play other games and compare it and see,
Yeah.
okay, in this, like, but here it's kind of like, it was probably one of the only games where it doesn't make, like, it's not really usable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, because the less engaged you are, the more powerful it might be.
Yeah.
The metric you might want to get, even though I think it's still not terribly useful, is to collect how many times someone restarted the game. Give them a lot of time to play the game, count how many times they restart the game, and of course how far they got before they restarted or decided not to play the game again. That could be a useful metric, but I doubt it. I think that is totally inappropriate for the game.
Yeah, but I think actually your questions about if you want to tell other people about it, that's a really important thing, especially for this communication in schools and so on, and talk about it and tell others about it.
Yeah.
I would even rephrase that slightly to, do you think playing this is worth someone else's time? Which to me is slightly different than would you recommend this to someone else? Because that more depends on the person, right?
Yeah,
like, I would recommend this maybe to one of you. I wouldn't have my mom play this game. It wouldn't work. She would just go, oh, right? So, but if I thought it was worth someone's time to actually engage with the material, I think that might be a tweak I would make.
But still, I think for serious games it could be interesting, because I'm thinking if you take Little Big Planet and use that, you could also use it and say, okay, are people really interested to continue if they did that, or or the moment they, I don't know, get contact with other players. But if you take serious games where we have the problem that people are really bored, like, they start the game, after 2 minutes they're like, this is really boring, and to kind of like use that with different games that are different than first-person victim would be, I think, interesting. Or at least it would be worth trying 10 different serious games, compare it, and then I think that would be very
find out the kind of serious game that is appropriate to.
It seems that you're trying to get at the intersection of engagement and meaningfulness, right? And it's something that we tend to substitute one for the other, right? Because we'll be like, oh, well, if they're -3 is because it meant a lot to them and they're affected by it, then that's why they're not engaged anymore, right? But that's not necessarily an accurate kind of depiction of that. So I think it's true. It's like, what is the relationship between your engagement in something and its meaningfulness to you? Which might be really difficult to get in some sort of quantitative way. I mean, it may just come down to, I don't know, player interviews or something like that.
But I think the metrics you showed last time, where you have the engagement in this
spider web.
Yes,
thing,
I think that's, for instance, something that we could totally use in the summers to kind of like, to ask the designers what they think the players experience, and then see, because that just takes a few seconds, and it will be very interesting to compare it, and maybe like a combination of this and that. But that depends on which game you're designing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But thank you very much for your time, and it's a nice discussion, and it's great to hear your feedback and that so many people play at the same time. That was actually really cool. So, thank you.
Thank you.